You can only cut costs so much. Eventually, growth has to be the driving force behind profitability.
They're still combining everything together. They're still hiding the ball on their promise that not that DTC would be profitable, but that Disney Plus would be profitable.
Renegade Online. Disney surprises with first streaming profit, although page I saw says they had a $19 million loss cumulatively, so we can discuss because we had the same issue last quarter with how they divvied up these numbers. But theme park blow sends stock lower. So, but we go down to the key points here, and we achieve strong double-digit growth of 19% for total segment operating income. They go through all this entertainment segment and operating income nearly tripled due to significantly improved results at DTC. Now, remember, the same quarter last year, they had about a $500 million some odd loss in DTC. And like we've been telling people, the way that Disney has really improved that bottom line number hasn't been so much in growth as it has been in chopping costs. And like we keep saying, you can only cut costs so much. Eventually, growth has to be the driving force behind profitability. And though they have shown growth, clearly, it's still not quite there, which is why we're getting these basically flat results on operating income for DTC. They showed $40 million last quarter in a profit on one page and a slightly different number on another, depending on how they broke it down. This time around, we'll go to a page where it shows that they lost $19 million in DTC, but they're still claiming there's a profit there somewhere, again, depending on how you broke it down. The issue with Disney that makes it difficult is that they have altered their methodology of reporting in the last year by moving certain segments of the company into new areas. It's a financial recasting is what they call it. And by that, I mean, for example, there's a lot of things where content and licensing used to be in one place, and now they're kind of split up somewhere between parks and movies, depending on what they're doing, or more specifically, or I guess a clearer example would be how ESPN Plus, which was a direct-to-consumer streaming service, ESPN Plus is no longer put together with Hulu and Disney Plus. It's now counted as part of the sports division. So, for example, the $500 million loss they showed in DTC a year ago in that quarter, that was after they finagled and recast things. So a lot of these numbers have changed. It's hard to go back and compare to a year or 2 years ago with some of these movements because ESPN Plus, of course, was a big cost factor in that DTC as well. But Disney Plus was the big one, especially when you're making $200 million shows like The Acolyte that virtually nobody's watching, that disappeared off the Nielsen ratings, the top 10 chart after a couple of 2 or 3 weeks. And that's it. That's been a big issue for Disney, is getting people to really with DTC to stick around and watch stuff on Disney Plus in droves more than just reruns of Bluey, which Disney doesn't even own.
Can I throw this in here as well? They got a big bump from the Spectrum deal, and then that appears to have fizzled out. The change from the previous quarter is 800,000 in the U.S. and it's lowered a little bit in the international market where they're basically giving it away. Hulu has gone up a little bit. Hulu is the one that is actually profitable here. And Hulu remains in the almost $13 per user in average revenue per user. So Hulu remains strong. But when they report these numbers, Disney Plus versus Hulu, they're still combining everything together. They're still hiding the ball on their promise that not that DTC would be profitable, but that Disney Plus would be profitable. They still have not answered that question. And it seems like the profits from linear networks have been lowered in a comparable way to how much it's gone up at Disney Plus, which, of course, with the Spectrum deal, they are cutting out their profits from linear networks and transferring that over to DTC and acting like to streaming and acting like it's this new income segment here, when in actuality, they're just chopping off one part of their business to replace it with another.
Yeah. And, a couple of other things on here as well is we look at this and we see things like we remain on track for the profitability of our combined streaming business to improve in Q4, with both entertainment, DTC, and ESPN Plus expected to be profitable in the quarter. Okay. And again, entertainment DTC is collective of both Hulu and Disney Plus. So there's no separation there between those two services. We know Hulu has long tended to do fairly well because they're an advertising juggernaut. Disney Plus far less so. Hulu is a bit unique in that space. But they say we continue to feel optimistic about our trajectory with multiple building blocks for improving margins. In Q4, we expect Disney Plus core subs to grow modestly. They had an increase of Disney Plus core subs in this past third fiscal quarter that ended on June 30th of about 700,000. So not a huge amount of growth. It seems like Disney Plus has leveled off, stagnated from that perspective. And again, as Jonas just pointed out, there is probably a significant amount of those core subs, I'm betting, as we go down and take a look at the numbers, that may have occurred here in North America, and those may have very largely been because of the deal with Charter Spectrum, meaning a lot of Spectrum customers signed up for Disney Plus because it was free with their cable package. So they are core subs that perhaps, and this is an accounting issue, depending on how Disney is crediting those new subs. So, for example, let's say they're collecting around $10 a month from every customer that is a Spectrum or Charter customer like me, okay? Traditionally, that $10 a month would go all into the pot for linear broadcast revenue, including ESPN, Disney Channel, and all that kind of stuff. There's probably some certain dollar value from whatever the new rate is. And it used to be about 10. We don't know for sure what it is now because that information is not really made public, but let's assume it went up to 12, maybe $13. Okay. They're probably crediting at least a couple of $2 or $3 instead of it going to linear. They may be crediting that to DTC now for every sign up that they get. So we don't know for sure how they're doing this, but that is something that may be asked on this call.
Maybe for Bob, I wanted to ask you about sort of the outlook for Disney Plus, both in the context of where the product's going, but also how this becomes a significant earnings contributor to the company as you look ahead.
It's not.
If you look at the product, it's really broadening. You've got, obviously brought in Hulu. Now you're adding news, a lot of sports, ESPN coming in. You've added the international NBA rights to the product overseas. What's the vision here? And in your mind, does it support both continued subscriber growth and pricing power? I think there's probably some concern out there that the recent price increases might face some consumer pushback. So I'd love to get
even that bad of a price increase.
Every time we've taken a price increase, we've had only modest churn from that, and nothing that we would consider significant. We believe that as we add these new features, like the channels that we're going to be adding later this year, and the success of our movie slate, and I'll get into that a little bit more, that the pricing leverage that we have is actually increased. We're not concerned. The goal is to grow engagement on the platform, and what I mean by that is obviously offering a wider variety of programming, which is why we're adding news, why we're adding the ESPN tile to it, while we're bundling aggressively to give consumers the ability to buy across all of our basically creative engines. And we feel very bullish about the future of this business. We're not saying much more about it, except you can expect that it's going to grow nicely in fiscal 2025.
Thanks. So Hugh, you talked about DTC getting to double-digit margins with the big price increases and the paid sharing efforts coming. I was wondering if you could just update us on your thinking. Would love to get some timing around double-digit margins if that's something you're comfortable with at this point, but any context would be helpful.
Bundling has had a positive impact on churn. So from that perspective, obviously that helps us with growth, which is one of the drivers. Password sharing is just starting to roll out. That's also going to be helpful in terms of driving growth. we've announced pricing, and we feel good with all of the value that we're providing to consumers with all the creative that Bob mentioned earlier and all the creative that's still to come. We do feel like we've earned that pricing in the marketplace, and we feel positively about that.
Do you?
With that will come scale benefits.
Mm-hmm.
The product improvements also should reduce churn and keep our consumers with us as they're evaluating their options.
Yeah, the Acolyte totally kept people engaged, y'all. But direct to consumer, this is streaming, guys. $5 billion in the quarter last year that ended June 30th, and $5.8 billion in direct to consumer this year. So about a 15% upgrade from that perspective. Okay, but direct to consumer here, and this is what we were talking about. You know, this. Are they making profit or are they making losses? Direct to consumer here, $19 million loss. Significantly better than a year ago, but still not great. Jonas, I know you were looking at that earlier as far as quarter over quarter.
Okay, yeah, actually, I want to share a chart from the executive comments here. Here's the thing that I want to point out, and it's one of my favorite of the ridiculous metrics that they can put up here. Combined DTC streaming business operating income and loss in billions. So first of all, the fact that it is combined DTC is already, it's not a lie, but it's an obfuscation of the truth.
That's the point
right here. So they're already saying that, oh no, well we're counting the Hulu profits, and that's negating all the DTC losses from Disney Plus. Also, they've gone in Q2 of 24 from -0 to Q3 24 to +0.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, because it's not enough to round up to even one decimal position, and because it's 19. But again, if we go back, and this was my point. Let me pull my screen back up to show you what I was talking about here. So this quarter, it shows a $19 million loss direct to consumer right there, black and white, 19 in brackets. That's a loss, right, kids? All right, watch this. Here's last quarter, direct to consumer, $47 million in profit. This is why I was saying, this is why there was some confusion. Last quarter, in one place they showed it was a loss. In one other place they showed there was a profit. And the same thing happened again this quarter. One place they showed there's a loss of 19. Another place they indicate that there was a small profit. Which is it? Again, it's like you said, it's the obfuscation of fact. And it just, they had a goal. They had a goal that they've stated for years, that they needed to be profitable by the end of fiscal year 2024. They were desperate in any regard to show at least one quarter that was in the black. By $1 even is all they needed to make that guidance a reality. They've done that, or they've claimed to have done that, but then immediately said last quarter, like we talked about before, no guarantee that that's going to continue.
Well, they did it by recalculating how they figured the number out. Like they didn't actually achieve it legitimately. They just changed the equation.
And that's my complaint about that fourth document that's on their website, because it is specific. It's not a generic disclosure. It's a specific disclosure that cites Hulu specifically, and that's what's got me all incensed.
But yeah, point being is that when you look at what's here, so they're back in the red. There's no telling what's going to happen. Like we talked about before, to all of our newer viewers that might be watching right now, this is why we said that there were delays in things like the Acolyte. You know, they're pushing that. They pushed that to August. At first, I thought it was going to be later in the year because Skeleton Crew was supposed to come out first. Skeleton Crew is now being pushed till December 3rd is when it comes out. That was supposed to come out early this year as opposed to late. There were some issues with production. Surprise, surprise. But the Acolyte came out before the end of this fiscal quarter. So in other words, the bulk of the costs would have been amortized into what we're seeing here under direct-to-consumer, because Disney Plus would have started taking those charges and writing them off or writing them down as an expense once that show premiered. Skeleton Crew, push it way off to the end of the year. Agatha all along, right? The next big show. That was pushed off till when? When is that debuting?
September.
Yeah.
Is it September?
Should be.
I thought Halloween, or is it Halloween? Sure. I think, are they starting after Halloween? Because the end of the quarter is what? October, November, December.
They start after Halloween. That show has no audience. They're trying to pull the hocus pocus.
It's October.
So it's Q1 for next year.
There you go.
Exactly. And that's my point. Is that No, well, actually, no. It is premiering Wednesday, September 18th. So they'll only have 2 episodes. The bulk of the episodes will be after the new fiscal year. So they'll probably try to divvy it up. Again, and this is all about trying to get as much profit or as little loss as they possibly can get on Disney+. One of the reasons why this direct-to-consumer loss went down as much as it did versus year over year, so you have $19 million loss on streaming for Disney versus $500 million this same quarter last year. Bob Iger has told you what it was. Again, look at the top line. The top line only grew 15%. Some of that was due to advertising, which I want to talk about that as well, because this 20% year-over-year increase in advertising, that's not that great. And we'll tell people why. But that only went up about $800 million. The bottom line is 96% better than it was last year. The reason is because they canceled a bunch of shows. In other words, they stopped producing as much core content for Disney Plus like they used to. So the way that Disney Plus is becoming profitable or closer to profitability here is because the Walt Disney Company has basically stopped making stuff. They stopped making Marvel stuff. They pulled the reins on some Star Wars stuff. In other words, the programs that go on Disney Plus that are supposed to be huge growth drivers for Disney Plus haven't been, and they cost a fortune. They spend $200 million on each one of these shows, like these Marvel shows and Star Wars shows. One of the big reasons why the losses are better is because think about the last couple of years. We've had 3 or 4 big Marvel shows on Disney Plus every year. So far, we've had 1, Echo, which nobody watched. Nobody watched that show. They probably spent $150 million on that, and it was awful. Nobody watched it. That was back in January, kids. Literally between Echo and Agatha All Along, another show that probably nobody's going to watch because nobody cares. That's going to be $150 to $200 million, I would bet. But by now we would have had at least 1, if not 2 other Marvel shows. They're not there. And the next thing after Agatha is, I don't know, what, Iron Fart? What is after Agatha?
Well, it's either that one or it's Ray Spent Wonder Man.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.